Hi there, everyone. Mychal A. Bryan here from the Oraculos School of Astrology with next week's astrology for the week of October 12th to October 18th, 2025. We are going to take a deep dive into the astrology of the week ahead so that you can keep your eye or keep your finger on the pulse of the astrology that is upcoming. Now, as you all may be aware of, this month is the month of magic, and it's a very special month as far as my life is concerned. It's not my birthday month, but it is a month that I tend to love quite a bit. And many people who I do love are actually born in October now that I think about it. So what I do every October is I do something magical, and this October we are going to be bringing back our Kabbalistic Tarot offerings here at the Oraculos School of Astrology. For those of you who don't know, the Kabbalistic Tarot is a huge part of my personal life. It has been the bread and butter of what I've done for a very long time. And there's a whole story about back in the day when Oraculos School of Astrology was actually called Tarot Dharma, which was the initial name of Oraculos. And then people started to think that all we did here was tarot. So that had to change. And eventually it became Oraculos School of Astrology. But anyway, be that as it may, we're going to be bringing back our Kabbalistic Tarot offerings for the month of October. So if any of you are finding yourselves at a crossroads and you're desiring to take a deep dive into the world of the Kabbalistic Tarot with me as a means of finding greater clarity or greater insight or a greater sense of direction, you know, that's ultimately what divination is for. Divination is meant to give us a sure-footedness in life and also a sense of direction. I've recently been watching The Sandman on Netflix, and one of the characters in it is this personification of destiny. And destiny gives people the worst advice, as far as I'm concerned, because it's always vague and it's always nebulous, and you can never really tell what he's trying to get at. And that's not the purpose of divination. The purpose of divination is to give us a clear sense of direction so that we can know what to do and how to do it in a better way, in a better, more effective way, rather. So if you all are desiring to have some insight regarding something that you have coming up, or you have a deep burning question regarding some larger topic within your life in general, then by all means, please do book a Kabbalistic Tarot reading with me. I have been out of the market as far as giving readings are concerned because, as all of you know, I have been deep in the trenches writing this book. I was going to say Mastering Traditional Astrology, but that's not what this is. I've been deep in the trenches writing this book, The New Western Medical Astrology. And if you haven't gotten yourself a copy of this already over on Amazon, please make sure to do so. But this has been my primary occupation. And when I'm writing, I really don't have time for anything else. So I stepped away from giving readings for quite a bit, and now we're back, basically. So, and I want to be back this month of October by celebrating the Kabbalistic Tarot and also by celebrating the role that the Tarot has had in my life. Tarot has largely made me into the astrologer that I am today. And if it weren't for my Kabbalistic Tarot practice, I would have no astrology practice, honestly. A lot of people don't know that, but that is the truth. So the Kabbalistic Tarot has always been at the very core of who I am as a person, and everything that we do at the Oraculos School of Astrology, every course, whether it's tarot related or not tarot related, it is indebted to my depth of beginning in terms of my tarot practice. So this month is Kabbalistic Tarot month here at the Oraculos School of Astrology. If you want to book a tarot reading with me, please make sure to do that, especially if you've never had the experience of working with the Kabbalistic Tarot before. I would love to bring you into that world because, as far as I'm concerned, the Kabbalistic Tarot is the astrologer's field guide to the universe. Wink, wink. That's me dropping a hint for something that I'm working on in the future. Anyway, also the last thing that we have coming up this month at the Oraculos School of Astrology is we do have what is it that we have going on? We have our medical astrology preliminary course, which is starting this October 26th. And you can find out more information for how to sign up for that over on our website at oraculosastrology.com. If you're interested in medical astrology, And you don't even have to be interested in it because you have a medical practice or anything. But if you're just interested in knowing how your natal chart speaks about your fundamental vitality in this lifetime and how to optimize your vitality and well-being in this lifetime through an assessment of your natal chart, then by all means sign up for our upcoming Medical Astrology Intensive, which begins this October 26th, 2025, in which I'll be teaching you everything you need to know about how to look at your natal chart from the perspective of medical astrology, as well as the charts of everybody from the perspective of medical astrology, so that you can be a medical astrologer in your own right, and so that you can begin to incorporate elements of medical astrology into your astrological practice, so that you can start to give deep, insightful, and concrete and accurate information to both yourself and your clients regarding how to best optimize your own health and vitality in this lifetime, regardless of what your current health circumstances may be. I am pretty sure that all of us in this current economy and in this current administration can use all the tools that we can get to stay on top of things as far as our health and well-being is concerned. So if you want to do that from an astrological perspective, which is our perspective, I think there's also that piece as well. As astrologers, this is what we do. We look at astrology as a means of getting greater insight into how life is operating in general, and our physiological health and well-being is a sure-footed extension of that. So if you want to bring your astrology to a next level, to the level of understanding what's going on within you from a medical astrology perspective, as well as understanding what's going on within the lives of the people you love from the perspective of their own astrological physiology, then by all means join us this October 26th for our 5-week preliminary course in medical astrology. We'll be meeting twice a week for 5 weeks. You can't beat that with a stick. So by all means, join us for that. Now, without further ado, we are going to dive into our forecast not by doing anything. We're going to dive into our forecast for the week ahead and take a look at next week's astrology so that we can see what's coming up in the sky. All right, so the first thing that we have coming up on October 12th is virtually nothing. And insofar as I'm a Uranian astrologer, I focus on hard aspects only. And the reason why I focus on hard aspects only is because hard aspects correspond with the manifestation of concrete events. You might have Jupiter trine your ascendant and nothing happens in your life. But when Jupiter squares your ascendant, that's when you go on your big trip, your big whirlwind adventure around the world, because hard aspects are the aspects of concrete manifestation. So on the 12th of October, we don't really have anything happening in the sky as far as hard aspects are concerned. So that's a wonderful Sunday to kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. What we do have happening, which I do quite like, is the fact that we have the moon who's going to be in Cancer. And while she isn't ingressing into Cancer on this day, hey, that's me. While she's not ingressing into Cancer on this day, she is going to be in Cancer, which is a very, very lovely thing. The moon is also going to be fast, as we see over here. And we love a moon in Cancer that's fast, because a moon in Cancer that's fast is a moon that is that much more predisposed to assisting us and aiding us with whatever we're trying to accomplish within our lives. We like a moon that does stuff. That's just a fundamental astrological fact. We like when the moon is making aspects. We like when the moon is fast. We like when the moon is in a water sign. We like when the moon is waxing. Fine, the moon on the 12th of October isn't waxing, but you can't have everything you want. But the moon is in a water sign. She is in her domicile of Cancer on the 12th of October, and she is moving fast. So I would say to all of us that for the next 2 days, from about the 12th of October to about the 15th of October, we take advantage of this moon. We take advantage of this moon. I just got a spam call. I don't understand living in America. I've never gotten a spam call, not even once when I was living in a third world country, in any of the 3 third world countries I lived in, not the Bahamas, not Jamaica, and definitely not Cuba, because people only got cell phones in Cuba like 2 days ago. So in no part of the third world have I ever gotten a spam call. But the minute I step foot in America, apparently every spam organization has my phone number. So sorry to those of you on Instagram who just got kicked off as a result of the spam call. Anyway, back to business. The moon in her ingress in her being in Cancer, rather, not ingressing into Cancer. But in the moon being in Cancer, it's a wonderful thing. She's also fast. That's going to be on the 12th of October. So I would say that anything that we're trying to do that we want to have some good juju behind or some good magic behind, we should try to organize those efforts while the moon is in Cancer, because she is definitely going to be ingressing into, where is she going to be ingressing? She's going to be ingressing into Leo on the 14th of October. The ancients say something about the moon in Leo and the sun in Cancer, which is that even though these two planets don't really have any major level of essential dignity while they're in those signs, it still offers them something. They still have some level of support because they are in the signs of their spouses. So we know that historically speaking and astrologically speaking, our ancestors have always viewed the sun and the moon as being in a relationship. As a result of that, when the moon is in the sun's house, which is Leo, even though she doesn't really have anything there to make her comfortable, she's more comfortable there than, for example, if she were in Mars's house of Aries or even Scorpio. Similarly, when the sun is in the moon's house of Cancer, the sun is more supported there than if he were in some other water sign, for example, such as Scorpio or Pisces. So even though this isn't qualifiable or quantifiable, and there's a lot within traditional astrology that can't be quantified, kind of like when we say that the moon just has some level of support when she's in the domiciles of Jupiter, whether it is Sagittarius or whether it is Pisces, the moon has some level of support when she's there, because in the same way as the moon's domicile is the exaltation of Jupiter, even though Jupiter's domiciles aren't her exaltation, Jupiter still allows the moon to have a relatively good time when she's in Sagittarius or in Pisces. So there's these things that we say in traditional astrology that have no ability to be quantified in any way, shape, or form. Whereas when we use the essential dignities model, we do know, okay, moon in Cancer, 5 points. Sun in Leo, 5 points. Sun in Aries, 4 points. We have this way of quantifying things, but that doesn't really exist in these nebulous areas of traditional astrology where we're told that the moon is doing okay in Leo, even though she doesn't have any major dignity there. Point is, the moon is going to be in Cancer from the 12th of October up through the 14th of October, at which point she's going to be ingressing into Leo. And once again, the moon in Leo may not have that much good juju, but she's doing better than if she were to be somewhere else. So that is the 12th of October. Now we're going to take a look at what's going on the 13th of October, because we have far more going on in the sky on the 13th of October than we possibly do on the 12th. So on the 13th of October, we have the combinations of our Venus in a semi-square relationship with Mars. Here we have it. This is Venus in a semi-square relationship with Mars. And that's happening on the 13th, followed by Pluto in a semi-square relationship with the North Node, which is also happening on the 13th, followed by Mercury in a parallel relationship with Mars, which is also happening on the 13th. Oh my goodness. Followed by Venus ingressing into Libra, which is also happening on the 13th. Oh my God, 13th, give it a break. Followed by the Venus opposite Neptune, which is also happening on the 13th. Oh my goodness gracious. Followed by Pluto stationing direct, which is also happening on the 13th. Have you ever seen such a thing? What is going on this day? All of these things are going down on the 13th. Let's break them down, because the 13th, as we can see, is a jam-packed day from an astrological perspective. First up, we have the Venus in the semi-square relationship with Mars. Venus semi-square Mars is what I call the sexy combination. I once said that on YouTube, and somebody was like, this guy is a heretic because he's talking about sex and astrology, which told me that people don't read. You know, as soon as I saw that, it was very obvious and evident to me that people don't read, because the description read as something else. And what I said about Venus and Mars being the sexy combination was probably the first sentence of 10 other sentences that I used to describe this. So in the Bahamas, we have the phrase, read Bahamas. And outside of the Bahamas, I guess we have the phrase, read world. However, we have the combination of Venus and Mars in a semi-square relationship. A semi-square is one of those interesting hard aspects that we tend to think of, not me, but people tend to think of as minor aspects. Here we have Venus at 29 degrees of Virgo, and we have Mars at 14 degrees of Scorpio. A lot of people tend to think of this as a minor aspect, and I mean, I don't know why. And the reason why I don't know why is because these aspects work just as strongly as any of the quote-unquote major hard aspects. And the reason for that is because hard aspects make stuff happen, period. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about divisions of space by 45, in the same way as this Venus and this Mars is 45 degrees away. Hard aspects make things happen. Hard aspects are the aspects of manifestation in general. And this is a part of the reason why we only talk about the hard aspects when we speak about the phases of the moon. Nobody speaks about the trine between the moon and the sun or the sextile between the moon and the sun because we don't really give a damn about the soft aspects of the luminaries. The only thing we speak about when we're referring to the lunar phases are the hard aspects, which yes, includes the major, conjunction, square, and opposition, but it also includes the quote-unquote minor, semi-square, as well as the sesquiquadrate. And I think insofar as we use the semi-square and the sesquiquadrate in speaking about the lunar phases, we really should not refer to them as minor aspects. Because when the moon is in her first quarter, that is a powerful vision to behold within the sky. There's nothing minor about it. And we might say, oh, well, the new moon and the full moon are more profound things to see, but we don't just talk about the moon based on the new moon and the full moon. We also talk about the moon based on the first semi-square relationship she makes to the sun when we're having our waxing crescent. You understand? So these are not minor aspects. The 45-degree semi-square is just as major as your square in general, and it's just as major as your opposition in general. All of these things have a place in the wider universe. Anyway, on this 13th of October, we have the Venus in a semi-square relationship with Mars. Venus-Mars is the sexy combination. It's one of the combinations that we love to love as far as hard aspects are concerned, because it gives us a passion for life and it gives us a passion to accomplish all of the things that are set before us. When a woman has Venus-Mars, she's a passionate woman. When a man has Venus-Mars, he's a passionate guy. It's a passionate combination, and today is a very passionate day for us to go out and pursue all of the things and all of the goals that really matter to us. Now, from a wider perspective, Venus has to do with our love relationships and Mars has to do with conflict. So it's also important for us to know that on a day when we have Venus-Mars, we do have a lot of passion, but the same passion that can turn you on towards somebody could also be the same passion that could make that person feel repulsive, or could make that person feel like somebody who you're very angry or upset with, because sexual desire and anger exist on a very similar spectrum as far as the ways in which they move us from our center, essentially. So Venus-Mars is a day that is a day of sexual desire, and we can transmute that sexual desire and turn that into something that is creative and dynamic and expressive of our unique individuality. And from the perspective of our interpersonal relationships, it can also be a day when our relationships become inflamed. Venus is the goddess that presides over our relationships. Mars is the god that presides over inflammation. So it's something for us to know on this day, which day is this? The 13th of October. Now let's take a look at the next combination happening in the sky on the 13th of October, because once again, it's a jam-packed day. The next thing is we have Pluto in a semi-square relationship with the North Node. That's happening at 1:45 p.m. EDT. Pluto has to do with, don't say transformation. One of the things that I really don't enjoy in this universe as far as Pluto language is concerned is transformation. Why don't I like it? Because we're astrologers, and our astrology is meant to be able to describe everything that happens in the entire known universe, and for some reason, all we can say about Pluto is transformation. Why? Or sex is the other thing. But if you go to an astrology conference and ask 99 astrologers what Pluto means, the first thing they're going to say is transformation. I don't like it. I don't like it just as much as I don't like expansion for Jupiter. Why are all of us saying expansion for Jupiter? Why are all of us saying emotions for the moon? Why can't we say other stuff, essentially? So, in an effort to broaden our Plutonian vocabulary at Oraculos, we say that Pluto is the god of forced initiations. What's an initiation? An initiation is something that you don't want to be forced to do. If you're going to initiate your life into whatever, whether it's a church, whether it's a cult, whether it's a community, whether it's whatever, you want to feel as if you have some level of agency about that. You don't want to feel forced. Pluto, in every way, shape, and form, has to do with forced initiation, forced periods of growing up that we didn't even expect to have to encounter ever, but here we are encountering them and doing the best to survive in the process. That's what Pluto is like. When you find yourself navigating something that you never thought you'd ever have to navigate, but it's smack dab in the middle of your face, and you're going through it, and it's painful, and it's gruesome, and it's ugly, and it's traumatic, and it's exhausting, that's a Plutonian situation. That's a Plutonian situation, especially when that situation has an air of inevitability attached to it. That's a Plutonian situation. I was speaking to someone the other day, I think it was maybe a group of students, about living in the Bahamas and knowing that every single year a hurricane is going to come. Maybe not every year, but often, hurricanes come. And my life has been such that I've always lived in hurricane-prone places. I lived in Bahamas, which was hurricane-prone. Then I lived in Santiago in Cuba, which was also hurricane-prone. Then I lived in Jamaica for a long time, which was very hurricane-prone. I've never lived outside of the radar of a hurricane until I moved to Boston. Thank Jesus. Anyway, but there's something about hurricanes that's very Plutonian. A hurricane is something that, as Caribbean people, we know that a hurricane is going to come every single year. We know that hurricane season is between July and November. And maybe I screwed that up because I don't really remember when hurricane season is. I only know that it's hurricane season when it's time to buy the plywood to put over your windows. But we know that hurricane season happens every year, roughly around that time, and yet we still choose to live there. Which for me growing up was just nuts. Like, why are we choosing to live in a place where we know for a fact destruction is imminent or destruction will come through? And then it took me a long time as a kid to realize that because there are some things that are just unavoidable, and hopping on a plane every hurricane season to get out of that really doesn't make sense, because ultimately you're still going to have to come back and you're still going to have to face the wreckage that occurred. And so for me, Pluto is or hurricanes as a concept is a very Plutonian thing. Whereas a tornado might be a Uranian thing, for example, because tornadoes come out of nowhere, even though someone just told me the other day that there's also tornado season. But tornadoes tend to come out of nowhere and they rip up everything and then they're gone. Hurricanes aren't that way. Hurricanes can pass over you. They can sit on top of you. They can wreak havoc on top of you. You can try to move from one side to the island to the next side of the island, and the hurricane follows you. And then you move back to the other side of the island, and the hurricane says, whoops, false alarm, and it follows you right back. So a hurricane is diabolical. Another word that we can use to describe Pluto. Why am I talking so much about Pluto? It's because on the 13th of October, we have the combination of Pluto in a semi-square relationship with the North Node. And when we have Pluto semi-square the node, we know that the node has to do with our intimate connections. Why do the nodes have to do with our intimate connections? Because the nodes represent the crossing points of the sun and the moon, or the crossing points of the orbital paths of the sun and the moon. And in the same way as the sun and the moon are representing our mother and father universally, the nodes, which are products of the sun and the moon's orbital paths crossing, also represent our intimate connections. So Pluto node has to do with a massive shift within our intimate connections. When we read the book, The Combinations of Stellar Influences, it says to us that Pluto node has to do with a great tragedy that is experienced by a massive group of people, or a great tragedy that affects the world at large, is essentially what we see with Pluto node, or some massive traumatic event that alters the destinies of a large group of people. So I'm not necessarily saying that that's what we should expect on this day, but I am saying that that's what the textbook definition of Pluto and the node is, that it can represent some massive tragedy that impacts and that alters the fates and destinies of a large collective of people. And this is something that we see happening on the 13th of October. Now, moving on through to on the same day, we have the Mercury in A parallel relationship with Mars. Here we have it over here. You know, I don't like colors. I don't like colors, which isn't the same as me saying I don't see color. But I don't like colors. I really don't like having a colored screen. I prefer my screen to be black and white. Thank you very much. However, I find that seeing this in a colored form is great for people because there's something about seeing those colors that makes you say, ooh, ah. So here we have Mercury and Mars in a parallel relationship. A parallel is just as important as any other thing, as any other hard aspect that exists within your chart. Now up here, we can see that we do have the Mercury and the Mars in an applying conjunction. The Mercury is applying to the conjunction of the Mars in about 4 degrees of arc. However, here we could see that even independent of this relatively wide conjunction, they are standing right on top of each other by declination. This is a part of why it's important for us to use the declination table. It's important for us to use the declination table because there are things that we see in declination that we don't see in typical charts. For example, over here, there is no relationship whatsoever between Jupiter and Uranus. We can see that Jupiter is at 23 degrees of Scorpio. Oh, Jesus. Jupiter is at 23 degrees of Cancer, 48 minutes, because people like to leave off those minutes. It's at 23 degrees Cancer, 48 minutes, and Uranus is at 0 degrees of Gemini, 53 minutes retrograde. That isn't even the smallest type of aspect that doesn't even exist. That is no aspect whatsoever. So we would be inclined to believe that Jupiter and Uranus are having no relationship with each other. However, when we look at it over here by declination, we have the Jupiter and the Uranus in a parallel relationship, which is a powerful thing for us to bear in mind because Jupiter-Uranus is one of our fantastic good luck combinations within astrology. So I'm saying this to say that this Mercury-Mars parallel is highly important, even though they may not be in an exact relationship by zodiacal standards. They are in a very close relationship by declination standards, and it's for that reason why we shouldn't go home without them. Mercury-Mars is the combination for inflamed language. It's the combination for people who are shouting and screaming and they have a lot to say and they don't care how their words land. It's the combination for words that are used to hurt. It's the combination for words that are used as weapons. Words comes from Mercury, weapons comes from the Mars. So the weaponization of language is a very specifically Mercury-Mars sort of thing. And it's something that we need to be mindful of on this day because on this day we already see Pluto-Node. The 13th of October, we already see the combination of Pluto and a semi-square relationship with the North Node, which is already denoting some level of, once again, tragedy that is experienced by a large collective of people. That is literally the textbook definition of Pluto-Node. It's happening on the 13th of October, and that is what it means. Tragedy experienced by a large collective of people. And on the same day, we have Mercury-Mars, which means that we are also speaking about that tragedy in a way that isn't helpful. Our words are being used to inflame something on the 13th of October that also really shouldn't be inflamed. You know, it's like, why do we add fire to fire? One of the things I've always found interesting, not always because I haven't even always known this, but one of the things that I have found interesting is that Dr. William Davidson, who was a medical astrologer, who practiced in the 1950s, and he gave a series of medical astrology lectures in the 1950s, said to us that Pluto is like a triple Mars or a triple impact Mars. So if the Pluto is already in a semi-square relationship with the North Node, meaning a large tragedy experienced by a large number of people, if that's already happening in the sky, why would we also use our ability to communicate to further a sense of warfare or to further a sense of adding fire to fire? That's kind of what today is. Today is a very inflammatory day. It's a very flammable day. And if it's, it's definitely going to manifest in the world at large. And I think that we as individuals should also be mindful of how we allow that to manifest in our interpersonal relationships. So don't allow your whole relationship to take a nosedive on the 13th of October because you are being overly influenced by the forces that be on this day. Now moving on through the glimmer of hope or the slimmer of hope. What is it? Is it a slimmer or a glimmer? Is it a sliver? It's something. The sliver of hope on this day, the 13th of October, is that Venus is ingressing into Libra, which we love. That's going to be happening at 5:18 p.m. EDT. For those of you who don't know, I use Eastern time because I am on the East Coast. And as we all know, East Coast people are selfish. So all things for me has to be rendered in Eastern daylight time. Anyway, on this day, we have Venus ingressing into Libra, which is lovely because we know that that is Venus's domicile. Here on the screen, we see that she's still at 29 degrees Virgo, but that's because I have this set at an increment of 1 hour. If I move it forward a bit, I'm not going to move it forward a bit. Just trust me that on this same day, the 13th of October, the Venus is going to be ingressing into Libra, and that is going to be happening at, what time is that happening at? That's happening at 5:18 p.m. EDT. We love a Venus in Libra. And the reason we love Venus in Libra is because we love all planets when they're in their own domicile. When a planet is in its domicile, it's like a king in his own castle. In the case of Venus, when Venus is in her own domicile, she's like a queen in her own castle. It's something that we love to see. We love when a planet is in its own domicile, period. Now, what we don't love, which is happening while this Venus is in Libra, is that the very first aspect that she's going to make in Libra is going to be her opposition to Neptune. And we know she's going to be making her opposition to Neptune because Neptune at this moment is also occupying the cardinal axis, that is 0 degrees of Aries. You know what? I love you all as people in general, so I'm going to move this forward despite my better judgment. I'm going to set this for 5 o'clock and move this forward so that we can actually see this Venus-Neptune action. So this is 5 o'clock, and we're going to move this forward again. Here we have the Venus at 29:59, the anaretic degree. As we know, we're going to move this forward again 1 more hour. And now here we have the Venus at 0 degrees of Libra. Here we have the Neptune at 0 degrees Aries. So we have the Venus-Neptune. This is a powerful combination. It's a bit of a scary combination for me. And the only reason why it's a scary combination for me, I don't even mean to say scary. It's not scary. But Venus-Neptune, here we have the opposition of those two planets. It's a combination of disappointment and love. Venus means love, Neptune means disappointment. It reminds me of that scene from the Game of Thrones where Cersei Lannister said to, I think it was her brother Tyrion, that she hopes that all of his hopes and dreams just turn into ashes in his mouth, which is crazy. You know, that's a very Venus-Neptune thing to say. And so this idea of the combination of Venus-Neptune is that things that we once desired, things that we once hoped for, things that once gave us a great level of peace and ease within the world are things that are now dissolving and turning into the very opposite of what they once gave us. It's like when a love relationship turns sour, especially when we enter that love relationship with the Neptunian haze around our eyes. We know that Neptune is the god of fog and fogginess, and to a large degree, Neptune is also the god of dreams, the lord of dreams. And so oftentimes we can project our dreams onto our love relationships, even if those love relationships don't have the ability to hold those dreams or nurture those dreams. We can project those ideas of what the relationship is onto the relationship itself without taking into consideration the actual reality of what that relationship is and how that relationship makes us feel. And that's a very Venus-Neptune thing, to keep going head first into any sort of love dynamic without taking a pulse of what's going on within that dynamic and ultimately finding ourselves in a place where we are surrounded by ashes and we are surrounded by destruction and we are surrounded by things that leave us feeling fundamentally broken and also fundamentally uncared for, because anything that's built within the world of Neptune is foundationally an illusion. Once again, I've been watching The Sandman on Netflix, which I think is an amazing series in so many ways. And the reality is that when we build our love on Mount Neptune, we're building our love within a container that's foundationally illusory, that's foundationally a lie. Now, it's currently 11:11 on the East Coast, which, as we all know, is supposed to be an angel number / gateway into the universe. So let's just take a moment and let's just set an intention for something that we want to desire within our lives or that we want to manifest within our lives. Let's just take a moment and create some sense of intentionality surrounding whatever we're trying to manifest for ourselves at this 1111 portal. Keep going. We're in it to win it. And it's now 11:12. Thank you for aiding and abetting me in my superstitions. I don't actually know if 11:11 does anything, truth be told, between me, you, Jesus, and the four walls. I don't know if it does anything, but I do know that having a designated time within our days when we can slow down and invest some level of intentionality regarding what we're trying to manifest, I know that that does something. Now, speaking to you all about things that we are manifesting, or to use this as a moment for a bit of a commercial break, a natural pause, as we say in the yoga world. At the Oraculos School of Astrology, we're making a lot of changes on the ground. And one of the big changes that we are making is that we're opening up a new breadth of community offerings for people who would like to be a part of our Oraculos community in a more intentional way. So we're going to be starting our OSA community, which you can all be a part of. And we're going to be starting a private members only set of offerings where we have a monthly menu of things that we're going to be coming out with, which are going to start to include these forecasts as well. But we're also going to have a chart delineation clinic. We're also going to have medical astrology research clinics. We're also going to have running topics. There are a lot of topics that I teach at Oraculos, or that I've taught in the past at Oraculos, that I just don't feel like teaching again. I just don't feel like putting on an entire 1-year program or 2-year program or 6-month program for again, because as you all know, that tends to be the shape of Oraculos programming. So within the context of our membership offerings, we're going to be releasing programs, or I'm going to be teaching programs in a way that feels more sustainable to me, which is going to include some of our Kabbalistic Tarot offerings, because as you all know, that's really the only thing I want to do in this lifetime is teach and work with the Kabbalistic Tarot. And astrology is kind of what I do for fun. But ultimately, a big part of my destiny is to teach and work with the Kabbalistic Tarot for sure. So we're going to be releasing more of our Kabbalistic Tarot content and classes and lessons within the context of that membership, as well as releasing just our chart clinics. We used to have chart reading clinics back in the day where people would come together on a Friday, they'd throw me a chart, I'd read the chart, they'd give me feedback, and we do that live. So point is, if you want to be a part of our Oraculos community in this more intentional members only way, please stick around and keep your eyes open, because we're going to be releasing some information about that in the not too distant future. It's something I've been trying to do for a while, and it took me a moment to think about how I wanted to go about doing that exactly. And I think that this feels right for me and for us ultimately, because Oraculos is a place where learning happens. And I think trying to pretend that we do something else other than learn at Oraculos is kind of stupid on my part, because I'm not like a pop astrologer. I don't have things to just give away for free. All I have to give away is education. So we're going to be doing that in this more intentional members only format, and I sincerely hope that you join us within that. Now, moving back to the astrology of the week ahead, let's come back over here and just take a look. So yeah, we have Venus-Neptune on October 13. And Venus-Neptune, like I said, is a combination. That's a tricky combination. I don't really like it that much, because it has to do with disappointment in love. It has to do with investing your entire heart and soul into whatever your love relationship is, and then turning around one day and realizing that that prince had never actually changed into a prince, but was a frog the whole time. So Venus-Neptune is the froggy love combination. And it's a day when we can be disillusioned in general, just about how people are showing up within our lives and about how we want to show up in people's lives. It's a day of really taking a real hard look at ourselves as far as love is concerned, and also as far as our intimate connections with others is concerned. So if you are a Venus-Neptune person in general, because you have some hard aspect relationship between Venus and Neptune, just be mindful that you may be more susceptible to this feeling of astrological letdown on this day, probably more than other people, because it's a combination that you already have within your chart. So having it happen in the sky, the combination of Venus and Neptune together, might feel like something that is very much intrinsically a part of your life experience in general, and it could feel not so comfortable. What to do with Venus-Neptune? You know, Venus-Neptune people end up being amazing artists, amazing dancers, amazing musicians. And I've rationalized that to mean or to reflect the fact that many Venus-Neptune people, as a result of not being able to find the love that they desire within the larger romantic sphere of their lives, they attempt to capture beauty in terms of things like art or design or music or theater or photography or watercolor painting or something to that effect. They attempt to capture beauty in a way where they can freeze it forever because they haven't really been able to find that beauty within their larger romantic lives. So it's kind of bittersweet because on the one hand, a lot of the people who create amazing work are people who've been heartbroken. Look at Adele, for example. That entire first several years of her career was dedicated to heartbreak music. And who knows, maybe she's a Venus-Neptune person who is the exact embodiment of this idea of the Venus-Neptune person excelling at art because they haven't really figured out how to excel at love. So that's what we have going on the 13th of October. Maybe today when Adele is going to release some new music. Just because she definitely is a Venus-Neptune girly. Now, on this day, we also have Pluto stationing direct. I have a lot of friends who make a big fuss about the modern planets stationing direct. That's Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. We have Pluto stationing direct at 10:52 p.m. EDT. And the big fuss has to do with if they're stationing direct on a natal planet. As far as I'm concerned, Pluto conjunct any natal planet or in a hard aspect to any natal planet is already something for us to be mindful of. So I don't feel as if this additional element of stationing direct is something that we really need to hold at the forefront of our consciousness. Oftentimes we say things in astrology that are superfluous or unnecessary. And so what does the Pluto stationing direct mean if Pluto is crossing my ascendant that it wouldn't normally mean if that Pluto were conjunct my ascendant? What does Neptune stationing direct on my midheaven mean that it wouldn't normally mean in general? Because in any event, if I have Neptune on my midheaven, whether it's stationing on my midheaven, retrograde on my midheaven, stationing direct, stationing retrograde, it's still going to be Neptune midheaven. It's still going to suck in the grand scheme of things. So this idea of elevating these planetary stations or planetary direction to some level where it needs a different layer of interpretation, for me has always felt like an unnecessary extension of what we do as astrologers. Now, if it works for you and if it floats your boat and if it makes you happy, then by all means go ahead and do it. But I don't necessarily think that this is the most important part of what we do as astrologers, because if Pluto is crossing your ascendant, it's going to make a huge impact, whether it is stationing direct, whether it is stationing retrograde, whether it's retrograde, whether it's direct. It's going to be a big deal in general without us having to open up a new chapter of a book on predictive astrology to read what the modern planets mean when they're stationing or when they're direct or when they're retrograde. It's just my opinion, personally. So we're not going to read too much into the fact that Pluto is stationing direct on October 13th at 10:52 p.m. because there are other things happening in the sky that we would like to get to. Now, the next day is going to be October the 14th, hold on, let me change this to increments of, let me bring this back to midday, and then let's move this forward at an increment of days. Now, the very next day is going to be Tuesday, October the 14th. And on Tuesday, October the 14th, we have another full day. These 2 days back to back are astrologically very intense. We probably want to keep an eye on them. On the 14th of October, we have the moon in a trine relationship with Saturn. That's going to be her last aspect before she goes void, of course. That's happening at 1:04 a.m. EDT, and she's going to be void, of course, until she ingresses into the sign of Leo at 6:46 a.m. EDT. So for those of you on the East Coast, we're going to be sleeping in any event. But for those of you on the other side of the prime meridian who are going to be wide awake at this time, just be mindful that the air is going to be astrologically dead between 1:04 a.m. EDT and 6:46 a.m. EDT. When the moon is void, of course, the astrological air is dead. There's not much for us to do other than wait for her to start doing stuff again, which she will start doing again when she ingresses into Leo at 6:46 a.m. EDT. Between that, at 3:02 a.m. EDT, we have Venus in a contra-parallel relationship with Neptune. And this is what that looks like over here on the screen down below at the bottom. We have the Venus contra-parallel Neptune. Venus contra-parallel Neptune, once again, is something that we don't like because it takes the sweetness out of life. It's kind of like Venus-Saturn taking the sweetness out of life. Venus-Neptune takes the sweetness out of life. Venus-Neptune is also one of the combinations that we find within the charts of people whose bodies can't fully metabolize sugar, because Venus has to do with our sugar intake and Neptune has to do with our ability to get sick from stuff. Neptune literally corresponds with the things that weaken our vitality, which is a part of why Neptune corresponds so strongly with allergies in general. So Venus-Neptune could indicate a sugar allergy. Now, we know that people usually don't have sugar allergies. What they usually have is sugar-based health conditions, such as diabetes. And so Venus-Neptune is one of the planetary combinations or one of the astrological ways of describing diabetes as an intolerance to sugar or as an inability to metabolize sugar. So the point of saying this is that on the 14th of October, we have a sugar intolerance, a sweet intolerance, things that should feel nice don't feel nice, and it's kind of leaving us with a bitter taste in our mouth and a body that just feels like it's suffering as a result of what we've tried to take in. That's what Venus-Neptune feels like in love, where the relationship could feel wonderful for a short while, but then afterwards it starts to turn rancid because it's just not what we were supposed to be doing in the first place. That's how Venus-Neptune manifests from a love perspective, as a disillusionment in love or a disappointment in love. And we see that happening in the air on the 14th of October. Once again, just got another spam call. As you all know, I only get spammed in the first world. So maybe I need to go back to a third world country where spamming hasn't even reached as yet. Now we're going to move on to the next thing happening in the sky on the 14th of October. We already spoke about the moon ingressing into Leo, and I also told you why the moon in Leo is better than the moon in some other fire sign. The reason for that is because the moon actually enjoys being in Leo a little bit, and the ancients say it to us just like that. The ancients tell us the moon enjoys being in Leo a little bit, and the sun enjoys being in Cancer a little bit. And the reason for that is because they're married to each other, so of course they enjoy being in each other's homes a little bit, but it's not necessarily where they would like to be in general. So on October the 14th, we have the moon ingressing into Leo. That's happening at 6:46 a.m. EDT, and that is where she's going to stay for the next 2.5 days. Now, what is significant on this day is, or I think what is more significant, or one of the most significant things happening on this day, is that we have Mars in a Sesquiquadrate relationship with Neptune. And that's happening on the 14th of October at 9:27 a.m. EDT. Mars Sesquiquadrate Neptune. Mars means action. Neptune means failure. Mars-Neptune means failed action. Mars-Neptune means making mistakes. Mars-Neptune means the missile was shot into the air, but it was shot in the wrong direction. Mars-Neptune means that we took war to somebody, but the war that we took to that person was mistaken. Mars-Neptune means that we are exerting and directing our anger in the wrong direction, and as a result, we're screwing things up for everybody. Mars-Neptune is the combination of thinking that you're doing the right thing, but absolutely positively 1,000% doing the wrong thing. Mars-Neptune is the combination of misguided energy, and that's also happening on the 14th of October. These 2 days, the 13th and the 14th of October, look like they suck. And they look like they suck based on the combinations that we've seen before. 13th of October, hitting us with the Venus-Neptune and also the Pluto node, which has to do with tragedy experienced by a large amount of people. That's literally the textbook definition of that. And the 14th of October, hitting us with the Mars Sesquiquadrate Neptune. So the Mars Sesquiquadrate Neptune is Mars at 15 degrees of Scorpio, is in the Sesquiquadrate with Neptune at 0 degrees of, what is that? 0 degrees of Aries, because we know that 15 degrees fixed equals 0 degrees cardinal, or better stated, 0 degrees cardinal equals 15 degrees of the fixed signs. Mars-Neptune, for me, is one of the worst combinations that exists within astrology. And the reason for that is because Mars is representing, to a very real extent, our vitality within this lifetime. If we have Mars representing our vitality and we have Neptune being one of the foundational planets that devitalizes, Saturn being the other one, then the combination of Mars-Neptune is a combination for us having no immune defenses in order to protect us from the onslaught of life. And that is essentially what Mars-Neptune represents. Mars-Neptune represents a state of weakness, a state of debilitation, a state of feeling sleepy all the time, a state of not having the fundamental get up and go in order to really live life to our fullest, because we feel as if we're dragging a body behind us that doesn't have the ability to function in the ways that it should. And we're dragging an immune system with us that doesn't have the ability to take care of us in the ways that it should. So Mars-Neptune isn't a great combination in general for the world at large. Once again, it is the combination of making mistakes, making large mistakes, making mistakes that we can't even justify. I think Chernobyl, in the chart of Chernobyl, there was a Mars-Neptune piece within one of the charts for Chernobyl, whether it was the ingress chart for Chernobyl or whether it was the actual Chernobyl chart itself. There was a combination of Mars-Neptune there. And we know today that Chernobyl happened as a result of negligence to a large degree. So Mars-Neptune is a combination that we also associate with just downright negligent behavior, or behavior that isn't founded in anything practical. And as a result of that, we end up finding ourselves making mistakes that are much larger than the mistakes that we should be making in general. So that is Mars-Neptune on the 14th of October. Let's keep our eye out in the world at large for huge mistakes that should have been avoided, but that we did not. Now, on this 14th of October as well, we also have the combination of Mercury in a Sesquiquadrate relationship with Saturn. And Mercury-Saturn is the combination of saying goodbye. Now, from a solar return perspective, sometimes we see Mercury-Saturn showing up in the solar return chart, in which somebody who is near to the native is passing away for whatever reason, because Mercury-Saturn has to do with saying goodbye. So a lot of difficult combinations in the sky on this day. We have the Mars-Neptune, which is a combination for making a huge error, followed by Mercury-Saturn, which has to do with depressing news. Mercury means news, Saturn is depression. And so depressing news that arises as a result of a huge error that's occurring within the world on the 14th of October is what we find occurring. So we want to keep an eye out for the 14th of October, because it's looking even more diabolical than the 13th of October looked the day before. Now, moving on through to the very next day, which is the 15th of October. As you can see here, we have no combinations for the 15th of October because nothing is happening in the sky on the 15th of October. So we're going to move on to the 16th of October and see what we have going on here. And on the 16th, we have two things happening, which is the moon is making her last aspect on this day, which is her sextile to the sun. That's happening at 1:05 a.m. After which she's going to be void of course for the next hour until that's not 1 hour. She's going to be void of course from 1:05 a.m. for basically the next 13 hours until 2:05 p.m. EDT, at which point she'll be ingressing into Virgo. So for that 13 hours, we need to find some other way to occupy ourselves, because occupying ourselves with anything meaningful during this time, or, releasing anything in the world that we want to have some bang during this time, isn't necessarily the best idea due to the moon being void of course. The moon functions well in Virgo. I don't know why. I don't really have any idea as to why that should be, but the moon does seem to function quite well in Virgo, as she also functions well in Taurus. Doesn't function well at all in Capricorn, but she definitely functions. I do know why. And I know why because as I'm saying this, I'm remembering that I wrote about the same thing in my book, Mastering Traditional Astrology. This book was a true meditative practice for me because in this book, I asked myself all sorts of crazy questions like, Mychal, why does the moon seem to function well in Virgo? You know why she functions well in Taurus. Taurus is her exaltation, but why does she function well in Virgo? It was, this book was like a mushroom fever dream of revelations that came up for me because I wanted to ask questions that were born out of an actual tangible astrology practice. And I asked all of those questions in this book, and I answered all of those questions in this book as well to the best of my ability. So if you haven't already gotten yourself a copy of Mastering Traditional Astrology, please make sure to do so because some very insightful work went into putting this book together. For all of my books, I think you all know this because, a lot of you have witnessed me within this space, but for all of my books, I start writing everything with an act of prayer, with a word of prayer. I don't do anything at all before I pray, or unless I pray first. And that's when I wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning and I need to type out a new 10 pages for my upcoming book. As I lay there in the bed, I take out my phone and I say, universal powers that be, please guide me as I write this work because without you, I know nothing whatsoever. And then I start to write. So I view everything that I do as far as writing is concerned as an act of my own religiosity and as an act of my own religious commitment to something greater than myself. So all of these books for me have been deeply spiritual writings because all of these books are initiated from a very prayerful place within myself. And sure, there is some of me that leaks into the literature as well because I don't know, I'm an overbearing presence or whatever. We all have our suffering. So yes, the books do also carry my voice, but I also hope that as a result of me starting them with acts of prayer, that they also carry the voice of something greater than myself. So Moon likes being in Virgo. She's going to be in Virgo on the 16th of October. We love to see it. Now moving on to the next day, which is the 17th of October. Once again, for those of you who are joining us on Instagram, I'm going to turn the camera around so that you can see what's happening on the 17th of October. On the 17th of October, we have Mercury in a Sesquiquadrate relationship with Neptune, and that is going to be happening at 1:30 a.m. EDT. Mercury Sesquiquadrate Neptune. Here we see Mercury at 15 degrees of the fixed signs in the Sesquiquadrate with Neptune at 0 degrees of the cardinal signs. Mercury Neptune, I kind of like. I kind of like Mercury Neptune because it's a great combination for people who have access to dreams. It's a great combination for people who know how to interpret dreams. It's a great combination for people who know how to live in the dream world. Dreams and dream work is also something that we're going to be adding to our community offerings as we move further on into this year and as we start up our Oraculos private online membership community. So I'm still mulling over all of the things in my mind, and I haven't really come up with a very specific thing of what exactly I want to do, but there's a lot on paper, and all of it is wonderful and delightful, from dream work to Uranian astrology. Numerology even popped into my consciousness as well, because I think some of you know that I spent a great deal of my life practicing and studying numerology as well. And that's been the one thing I've never brought into our Oraculos curriculum as an actual part of our Oraculos curriculum. Because why? Because it just seemed to have the least relationship to everything else we were doing at Oraculos. And I really wanted Oraculos to be the vanguard of something very specific. However, numerology is also a huge part of my life. And there's a part of me that just doesn't understand why it works. I've studied numerology for years. At the minimum, I've studied numerology for a decade because my spiritual practice started with runes, the rune stones, and my rune practice moved from runes to tarot to numerology. I think all of these things just rushed into my life at the same time. And numerology was what I started giving readings in. Before I did anything else, I started giving readings with numerology in my godmother's nail salon. That is what I was known for in the Bahamas at 13 years old as the Bahamian numerologist. And it was whatever. It was like, okay, I'm having a great time. I'm learning something. People are getting a lot from it as well. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And I think as I grew older and I developed more of a critical mind, I just couldn't understand why numerology worked. Period. Because it seems to be based on a stupid premise. Like if you really think about it, that these letters in my English name, because that's also another thing that we find within numerology, that it's really based on the English alphabet. So the way how we practice numerology in the West doesn't really easily translate to places in the world that don't use the English alphabet, which for me is a part of why it seems quite stupid, because I don't really believe in a cultural-based divination that isn't applicable beyond the scope of that culture. So I don't believe in a Western divination that can't also be applied to the Chinese alphabet or the Japanese alphabet or the Korean alphabet or something to that effect. So that's a part of why numerology has always felt very, not just egocentric because it's highly rooted in Western culture, but also very speculative because astrology works in no matter what culture you put it in. Somebody could come to me from Korea and receive a Western astrology reading and it works for them, just as if I were to give them a reading using any other system of astrology. But the numerology piece doesn't work unless you have a name that can be translated to the English alphabet. You know, it kind of feels ick. Like there's a big ick factor surrounding that. So as a result of that, I never really brought it into the fold of what we do, but it works. It really, 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 really works. And you know, I don't really say that many things work, and I don't put my reputation behind saying that many things work, but numerology as a study is something that absolutely, positively, 10,000% works, and I don't know why. And because I've spent so much of my life dedicated to the Kabbalistic Tarot and to astrology, I've invested none of my brain power into really thinking about why Western numerology should work as wonderfully as it does, but it does. And I remember there was one day I was on the phone with an Oraculos alum named Jack. And I was like, hey, Jack, do you want me to show you this cool party trick that I used to do back in the day? And he was like, sure. And I broke down Jack's name and date of birth using numerology. And at the end of that reading, and for me, it wasn't even the reading. It was just like, hey, let me show you this thing that I used to do as a kid. At the end of that reading, he was like, Mychal, that was so insightful for me. And it actually brought me to tears. And you've said things to me during this numerology for me that I've never even heard an astrologer say to me. I've never even had the level of insight. I've had other astrological insights, but I've never had this specific level of insight that you've given me through the numerology. And it brought me to tears because I feel so seen and something within me feels so acknowledged. And I was like, oh shit, you know, whoa, like, wow, I wasn't really expecting that because once again, I've made no space within the establishment of Oraculos as a school to prioritize the numerological wisdom that I've amassed throughout the years. However, within the context of our Oraculos membership-based community, maybe that's something that we could bring more fully into the fold of what we do. So anyway, all of these ruminations are happening. It's a very fertile time in my mind. All right, so how do we get there? We got that because I was saying that I really like Mercury Neptune as a combination because it's a combination of dreams and it's a combination of knowing how to come up with creative stuff that is nice, like whatever I just shared with you. So that's happening on the 17th of October, the Mercury in the Sesquiquadrate relationship with Neptune. It's a wonderful day to dream a new dream. And on the 17th of Neptune, what I really, really, really love is that on this day, we also have the combination of the Sun in a square relationship with Jupiter. That's happening at 1:42 a.m. EDT. Sun Sesquiquadrate Neptune plus the Sun Jupiter is a day when we're not just dreaming a new dream, but it's also a day when we have the ability to make that dream become a manifest reality within our lives. I love this day. All the other days sucked. In the coming week, between me, you, Jesus, and the four walls, the other days sucked quite literally. But as far as good days are concerned, this day, the 17th of October, is a wonderful day because we have the ability to dream a new dream, and we also have enough success within the air to make that possible. And golly damn, if Jupiter isn't also in the sign of Cancer at the same moment. It's a wonderful day. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day, the 17th of October. It's also the birthday of someone very near and dear to me, and I love to see such a beautiful day manifesting as I will be celebrating the birth of a very beautiful person. Wonderful day. And I'm not just saying it's a wonderful day because it's the birthday of somebody who means a lot to me. I'm saying it's a wonderful day because as astrologers, we should be able to look at charts and look at dates and look at astrological combinations and say which ones are good and which ones aren't good. That's just a fundamental part of what we do and what we should be able to do in general. Moving on. The final day this week is going to be the 18th of October. And on the 18th of October, we have the combination of the moon making her last aspect in the sky on this day, which is going to be her opposition to Saturn before she goes void of course. She's going to be void of course for a bit before then before she ingresses into Libra, which she will be doing on the 19th of October. But to find out about that, join us for the astrology of the next week, which isn't this week, but the next week, when we'll be taking a look at the astrology for October 19th and 7 days after that. So this is our astrology forecast for the week ahead. Yeah, this is our astrology forecast for the week ahead, for the week of October 12th to October 18th, 2025. I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this forecast. Once again, if you like the work that we do here at the Oraculos School of Astrology, please make sure to subscribe to the Oraculos podcast wherever we are on the internet, which includes Spotify and Instagram and YouTube, and just share the good news. I enjoy coming here and doing this work, and I sincerely hope that you are enjoying the work as well. Also, once again, if you haven't already picked up a copy of my book, The New Western Medical Astrology, please make sure to do that because that is available now on Amazon and you can go and buy yourself a copy. Until next time, I'm your host, Mychal A. Bryan, leaving you in peace and love and hope. Until we meet again, have a good one. Bye.